now we have Monica and Andrea Moncayo joining us on stage. They run the Bridge Initiative, which accelerates the financing of climate mitigation and adaptation projects in the Global South. And they are here today to present the carbon reduction projects supported by CoMotion Global to offset the emissions generated by this big event. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome on stage Monica and Andrea Moncayo.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, I'm going to start with a quick question here. So, how many of you flew to be here at CoMotion? That's quite some people. So, if we have not flight, let's say, if those flights had not happened, we would not be able to be here, participate, connect, and be inspired by tomorrow's mobility solutions. Mobility creates opportunity, but it also carries a climate cost. And acknowledging that cost is the first step for the sector to intend and to act for sustainability. That's why we're here today. So the Bridge Initiative, and what you can see in the left hand of the slide, no need to read, but our intention is to support organizations to understand their carbon footprint and be able to identify the residual emissions. Once you understand the residual emissions, we help and support to navigate the voluntary carbon market. We help the investors to transact, to connect with project developers in the global south, that mitigate and help to adapt to climate change. Why it is important to CoMotion? Well, the flights that we have taken to come here do have some emissions, right? And CoMotion is engaged and committed to compensate those emissions. And it's important because the aviation sector has a contribution to 2.5% of global emissions. But if we consider that airplanes are, let's say, operating in altitude, there are known CO2 emissions that are contributing to 4% of global warming so far. So it's not insignificant. And that's why CoMotion is willing to compensate those emissions related to the international air traveling. We are supporting the organization to understand what are those emissions, how many are they, and how we can best compensate it through the best fit, high-quality carbon projects. In a later stage, we will support a company to retire those credits and to do a transparent reporting of this. Just to understand, carbon credits are a revenue source for these climate projects. So without this revenue, the climate projects happening in the South, and afterwards we're going to explain and let's say, exemplify the project that has been selected for CoMotion. We help these projects to be financed. So that's important. The carbon credits are a vehicle to the climate funding. Well, so let's get a deep dive into what means the voluntary carbon market. And specifically, it's formed by carbon credits. What is a carbon credit? A carbon credit equals to 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalent reduced or removed from the atmosphere versus a baseline scenario. What means that? Means that without the existence of the project. So a carbon credit has its own identification, unique identification, and it's issued and retired by a specific carbon crediting program. That means that can only be used once. And therefore, carbon credits is a very important source of mechanism for climate finance. And in a certain way, it permits or allows organizations to invest in projects that are generating positive impacts, not only to the environment, but as well as the society, meeting with the United Nations development goals. So let's move a little bit into, does it move? Ah, yeah, perfect. So the Integrity Council of the Voluntary Carbon Market determines the main core carbon principles that are required in order to meet or to obtain high integrity carbon credits. So in order to determine what is transparent, credible, and high integrity carbon credit, they must meet these core carbon principles. These ones are contained in these 7 ones. So we'll start with additionality. And additionality means that the carbon credit would have never exist without the availability of climate finance. So it requires the climate finance in order to exist the project. Second is the permanence. That means that the reductions or the impact from the reductions cannot be reversible. Okay, so it should maintain time. The third one, the robust quantification. That means that it should have a robust, credible, and recognized measurement tool in order to calculate the real carbon emissions that are generated or reduced or removed from the atmosphere. Validation and verification. This is a very important one, because what it means here is that it requires an international high integrity standard in order to verify the determined project. So, such as we have examples like Gold Standard, Vera, and Cert Carbono. And here with Cert Carbono, I would like to highlight that they won the best crediting program for 2025 from the Environment Finance. And with the project that we will present in a few minutes, they are certified by Cert Carbono. Independent audit. So this project should be audited with an international third party, totally independent. No double counting means that the impact generated by the emissions that are reduced or removed to the atmosphere can only be counted once, cannot be counted more in order to guarantee the credibility. And sustainable development impacts and benefits. That means that the project should guarantee that the local communities respect the rights, the human rights, the gender equality, and of course the fairness, guaranteeing the sharing mechanisms from the benefits obtained by the carbon credits to the community as well.
And don't be, let's say, scared by all of these principles. It's theory, but now it's being, let's say, facilitated and simplified by the registries that Andrea mentioned. So the projects that are available to support have already been, let's say, checked through all these principles so that organizations feel comfortable providing finance to these projects. So now let's talk about the project that has been supported by CoMotion, or that is being supported by CoMotion. We're talking about the second largest landfill in Latin America. So in Bogota's landfill, that receives over 6,000 tons of waste per day, there's a project that captures the methane from organic waste decomposition and transforms it into electricity. This process is reducing over 800,000 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions per year. That's quite massive. And if you want to understand a little bit what this represents, we're talking about taking off the streets 400,000 cars per year. So let's say the impact is significant. Besides the electricity production, we're talking about 15 megawatts of firm capacity. There's also a production of biomethane. So in terms of environmental impacts, let's say this project can be conceived as exemplary. But as Andrea mentioned, it's not all about environment. There are also social benefits. So let's take a look at it. We have discussed about cities, right? And this project has a big impact on Bogota. Bogota is an over 10 million inhabitant city.
And the landfill is located in a place where the population living, let's say, in the vicinity is low-income households. And before this project, they were being affected by the odors going from this landfill. And after the project, the air quality has improved significantly. And not only the air quality, but the water quality of the whole city. So it goes beyond, let's say, the reduction of CO2 emissions. We do have social impact. It has reduced odors, and it has reduced the problem of plagues, like flies and rats, that were around the landfill before this project happened. So the finance of these type of projects is vital, not only then for our planet, which has no frontiers in terms of CO2 emissions, but the social impact of a whole 10 million city. And we would like to end, if this allows, with a question to you, and is more about, do you know the residual emissions from your organizations? Do you know the carbon footprint from your organizations? And I think it's time for all of us to have this consciousness. We have talked about clean energy, and the question that raises up is how we can act on the residual emissions today. Thank you.
Yes, but at the end, we want to have an important invitation for you to have the courage to be part of the solution. Let's make the difference. The only way to make the difference is making it all together. Thank you.